is a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing a legend in dental consulting.
Well, thanks.
I've been her biggest friend, Amy Deschamps, and this is a big treat for you because let me read her bio. As a recognized speaker and practice operations specialist, Amy Deschamps works with professionals to teach them to better understand that the numbers matter when a practitioner is looking to achieve results, make an impact, and improve effectiveness within the dental business. Amy is a true thought leader who takes practices beyond the basic systems and strategies to an unparalleled level of application. With a wide-ranging clientele that includes individual, group, and multi-practice entities, Amy is a transformation expert who has coached hundreds of dental professionals on the unfiltered story the numbers reveal about the health of the practice and the steps necessary to initiate specific goals and systems implementation for success. Her combination of business sense and compassion will leave you inspired and positioned with the tools to make positive changes for increased success. Let me tell you in a nutshell what Amy does. A lot of times people will start jumping in to do a root canal, build up a crown, and the doctor's like, okay, you missed it. It's a perio, you need to get the diagnosis right. Amy is a genius in reading the numbers. I mean, she can see your numbers from 1,000 miles away and know what you're doing right or wrong in your practice, treatment plan, case acceptance, profitability, overhead. And let me tell you this. Let me just say this. If you are going to buy or sell a practice, you don't even know what you're buying. I mean, go into Dental Town, every damn case story about a dentist buying a practice, it takes them 6 months to figure out what the hell was going on, what was wrong, all this kind of stuff. If you're going to buy a practice, you should have Amy come look at your broker wants to sell the practice. Amy's working for you. She'll go through the numbers and she'll tell you exactly what you're buying. And even if there's big problems, you might be a perfect fit for those problems. There might be problems that you're not a perfect fit for. But Amy, I see you as a numbers crunchers. I've worked with you in the past. You've come to Dental Town in the past. So talk about what you do in your own words.
Sure. So D4 Metrics basically talks about the 4 areas of business that I focus on when I'm looking at a dental practice. We have the facility, the team, the patient base, and the schedule as my 4 areas of focus. Within each of those areas, when I'm looking at a practice, I try to really help a dentist, a buyer, if it's a transition, help them really understand what those numbers mean. And, oftentimes people don't understand how many patients. If you look at your software, it tells you you have, 4,000 patients. What's that mean, 4,000 patients? Well, if you had 4,000 patients, you'd have, 20 chairs of patients seeing all day long. So we look at really the active patient and understand where we are in relationship with them. And I begin to break all of that data down for yourself as a current owner. Let's say, Howard, you told me you wanted to sell your practice. And I'd go, okay, well, I need to understand what you want to sell first and foremost. How many patients do you have to sell? How many days of hygiene are you doing? So I begin to really dissect the operational health of your business so that you have a clear understanding of what you have to sell, and a buyer is going to have a clear understanding of, okay, so maybe you're not doing endo in your practice. Maybe that's something that they bring to the table with their skill sets. So we really begin to understand what your business has to offer and what you could do within your business to either bring on an associate. If you wanted to bring in someone, do you have enough patients to bring on an associate? Or maybe you want to keep doing what you're doing and maybe step out a day and bring somebody in to fill that day. So all of that has equations and numbers and data that fits around it. And that's what I really help someone understand in the process of really getting into the story that the numbers tell about their business. So I live and breathe data.
Is that an Apple Watch? Is that data driven?
Actually, it's a Samsung watch.
But is it like an Apple Watch?
Yes,
I mean, a digital watch.
Just like the Apple Watch.
Does it sync to your Excel sspreadsheet? Does it sync to your phone?
I can actually open up documents.
Well, Amy, do you call it middleware? I mean, there's all these dashboard companies.
Mm-hmm.
Can you name them all? I mean, what are the
big ones? There's Sika.
There's Sika, which is VJ Sika. Mm-hmm. Sika software.
Yes.
What else?
I've actually been investigating other products that are out there. I find that if there's too much data, you lose the actual doctor.
But name some of those companies.
Oh my gosh, I can't even begin to tell you all the different ones. I know that I've tested some that I haven't actually
But
used.
my point being this: how many do you think there are?
Oh
Half
my gosh,
dozen, a dozen?
Yeah, there's. I mean, at least those that I've tested.
But-
there's been 4 that I've tested.
Okay, so if most of the offices are using Henry Schein's Dentrix or Patterson's EagleSoft,
Yes.
yet there's a dozen other companies just telling you data that's.
Yes.
I mean, it kind of is a factual reflection that Dentrix
The
and
software doesn't give you
EagleSoft.
enough information.
I mean, to call Dentrix or EagleSoft a management information system would be like calling me a Chippendale.
Yeah.
I mean, how did they miss the mark that far?
They're basically a database. They're not there. I mean, let me say that Dentrix is working a lot on the back end side to begin to really understand the metrics at a different level. They have their profitability advisor program that they've brought on. So, because I have clients that have used that, and that's helpful, but everybody wants to know case acceptance, and you cannot get that out of Dentrix. In the
Dentrix reminds me, Dentrix and EagleSoft would be, if they were a restaurant, there'd be a dozen restaurants around them. Hey, they're not going to give you water at the table, so here's water. And there'd be another business. Hey, they're not going to give you any bread and butter, so here's a bread and butter. And there'd be 10 people around there just saying, you're basically not going to get anything you need. I mean, there's more peripheral businesses supporting those crappy software systems. I mean, it's crazy.
I
but
agree.
if these
So
kids, but if these kids, a specific question are asking is, if you were a millennial, because podcasters
Yes.
are younger, if they were going to buy a management information system, there's Dentrix, there's EagleSoft, there's SoftDent, there's Open Dental, there's just a bunch
Curve
of
now. That's
Curve. Is there any of them that are more closer to a management information system than others?
Not from my perspective.
Yeah,
What
it's-
I find though is that even with what they have, they don't know how to utilize. And that's really how I got to a deeper level of understanding data, because I can go into that software and extract data out and begin to filter and understand what's truly in that database. And a lot of people don't know how to truly use their software. I mean, I do a lot of work with the CPA firms because they want to know that it's not garbage going in and garbage coming out. We want to make sure that we get the right data going into the software. So I'll go in and help the admin people understand how to put the proper data in the right places, right adjustments, etc., in their software. So that's part of my coaching training that I'll do that helps me get the right data as well. So with what I do in my business, I do focus on numbers and data and transitions assistance and due diligence. Once that acquisition happens, oftentimes they'll ask me to come in and help them with the coaching side of it, with systems implementation and so forth. I can do that. That's not the primary focus of my business, but I've been trained to do that, and I've done that for many years. I live and breathe helping a buyer through that transition process of purchase and acquisition because they are so in the unknown area. I recently did one where I stopped by the office a couple of weeks ago to see how they were doing, and the doctor said, I can't tell you how many times I wanted to jump ship, but you walked me through and you held my hand, and had you not been there, I probably would have jumped ship. But it's because of you that I actually went forward with the process, because you helped me understand what I was getting into and that this could work. So when I get a buyer, I've had one call me last week, and he's actually in the process right now where broker's asking for data, they're asking to sign an LOI, and he's going, what the heck, you want money down? I don't even know what I'm buying, I can't, why am I doing this? I had to help him understand that that's standard process. They want to lock it up for a period of time, so in order for you to lock it up, you have to give them earnest money, but you have to get an attorney involved at this point. So you have to have a team of professionals that can help you through that process. So due diligence is not just, hey, I want Amy to look at the practice. Due diligence begins with having a team of professionals, a CPA that can look at the numbers, an attorney that can look at the contracts, myself who can look at the health of the practice. You need the brokers on the broker side, so they're going to bring you the practice. Then you got to have bankers involved. So you've got to have a team of professionals when you want to get into that process of buying. And a lot of people go, oh, I want to buy a practice. Let's just go and see what I'm going to buy. So there's a lot involved in the process, and My role as an advisor is to help them through the process so that they're making an investment that's going to impact their family, their future, their livelihood, and I want them to make a smart investment based on what their vision is.
So what was that game show you watched where there's something behind curtain 1, 2, and 3? What was that? What was that? Remember that show?
I remember the show,
was
but
it
I don't
The
remember
Price
the
is
name.
Right?
Price is Right, I think.
What was it? Was it Price Right? I mean, from my understanding, anytime I talk to any dentist that's buying a practice that just bought it or is in close, all they really know is what they bought it for. And they go, well, I'm buying it for $750. Mm-hmm. And then if you ask them any detail about the office, they look like a deer staring in a headlight. Yeah. They have what percent of, and then they have this faith that, well, I'm buying it through a big brokerage like AFCO, which stands for Allen F. Thornburg out of Atlanta. I mean, but the broker wants to sell the practice and make a commission. Mm-hmm. I mean, they would sell you. I mean, they want. I mean, if a real estate agent shows you a house, they want to sell the house. They're not going to talk you out of it.
Bottom line is, in a purchase, it's going to come down to what the bank is willing to lend on the cash flow of the practice. So you have asset, income, and market approach when you're looking at purchasing a practice. Not all brokerage firms give you that perspective on buying a practice. I have a sister who's a dentist in Kentucky, and about 4 years ago we sold her practice. In order to sell her practice, I hired someone to give us the asset, income, and market approach value for her practice, because I wanted her to know what was a realistic number that we could put her practice on the market for and get a buyer. So from the seller's side, in that perspective, I told her, you need to get somebody to look at this. Let's get a number. Most people say, well, I feel that my baby is pretty, so I'm going to put this price on them. And their baby being their practice, when I come in and say, well, your baby's a little uglier than what you thought, because it's really probably not worth that, because the goodwill's not there, et cetera, et cetera. So I come in and help that buyer truly understand what they're buying. But when you really want to know what that value of that practice is, it's based on asset approach, income approach, and market approach. And someone will do an assessment for you and give you an average number to get you to a better understanding of what that value is of that practice. I do not put a dollar value on the practice when I help a buyer through the due diligence phase. The practice is listed for a dollar value. And that's based on what the broker and the seller come up with as their agreed upon, this is what I want to sell my practice for. So I don't get into the negotiations of the dollar value for the purchase of the price. I get into the operational health of the practice and say, okay, so here's how many patients that you're in relationship that you're buying. Here's what the accounts receivables look like. A lot of times I run into accounts receivable where there's a lot of credits. I'm dealing with one right now where there's over 30,000 in credits. Well, what does that look like if I'm the buyer and I'm buying 30,000 in credits? Well, someone has to satisfy those credits, and we have to understand where those credits are coming from. And either we have to satisfy those credits, send the money to the patients, or the buyer and the seller come to an agreement on, I'm going to give you concessions for those credits, which I'll take amount off the purchase price, whatever the agreement comes to, so that we really know I've got the extra money there if that patient came back and said, I want my money back, if they knew they had a credit. Or if the insurance comes back and says, hey, we overpaid, we want our money back. Somebody has to satisfy those credits. And the seller has already been paid for those or given concessions for those. My buyer needs to now understand that here's how much is in credits. What are we going to do about that? And this is a real critical area that a lot of people don't even understand when they're going to look at buying a practice. They miss that part. It's, am I going to buy the ARs or am I not? EagleSoft ARs make me sick to my stomach every time I look at them, because when I have a decision to buy ARs, for example, and they say, well, I'm going to buy the 0 to 30 at this percentage, and I'm going to buy the 30 to 60 at this percentage, and then we're going to throw out the 90s because I'm not going to be able to collect that. In EagleSoft, on their AR report, it doesn't take into consideration at the bottom column totals that I have a $70 credit here in the current, but I have a $70 debit over here in 60 days. It offsets it over here at the end for the total column, but if I'm getting the total at the bottom for that column, it doesn't take that into consideration that zero's out. So I have to go through line by line entry.
I know, but if you ever listen to their founder, Pete Frechette, on a conference call, he knows all of his numbers and price earnings, and then you switch over to Shine and Stan Bergman. It's all numbers and finance. And then you look at their own product for their own customers, and you're somewhere between Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles. You're like between blind and dead.
Yes.
So what software would you recommend if they were going to buy one? Is there any good?
Based on what I see, the software's functionality are very similar. I have my preference of Dentrix only because I've worked with it for years and I'm more comfortable with capturing data out of it. I can run more query data out of Dentrix than I can out of Eaglesoft. Eaglesoft already has preset reports that you can generate. Within Dentrix, I can do much more query opportunity of reports in there. I can go in and say, tell me this procedure code or tell me this date range or whatever specifically that I want, and I can do much more query analysis within Dentrix than I can in Eaglesoft. So from my aspect of utilization of data, I prefer Dentrix.
Now, have you ever worked with Open Dental?
I actually do have a client that I've been working with on Open Dental, and they actually have the ability to do queries as well, but I've not done a due diligence on an Open Dental client as of right now. Okay. It's mostly been Dentrix, Eaglesoft, and SoftDent.
It's kind of like I look at Open Dental as like I hate the two-party system. I've been a registered libertarian for 20 years, and it's amazing how like these debates, you know, there's a libertarian candidate, there's a Green Party candidate, but they just keep it two parties. You know what I mean? And it's like, the two parties in government has served us horribly. Yeah. And Dentrix and Eaglesoft have served us horribly. Yeah. So I'm trying to, I'm still voting libertarian. I'm still looking for other because basically Dentrix and Eaglesoft, you're never going to be able to run a business. I mean, like they'll sign up for a PPO price. And if you paid your bills on one system, it would if you paid every bill for your dental office on a system, then it's set up, well, how many operatories you have. It would know your operatory hour costs. Yeah. So if the girl up front is scheduling an hour for an MOD composite and that room costs $300 and you just signed up for a PPO for $250, it should tell you you'll lose $50 an hour on this deal. Or you can't schedule an hour for an MOD composite. You're going to have to go 45 minutes. And then if it said you only make money in 30 minutes, then maybe the dentist say, well, I can't do a composite in half an hour. I need to go to amalgam, or I can't take this plan. But it looks like all the disaster decisions. But I want to go back because, well, first of all, how do you get paid on this deal? I
do a fee for a project based on when the client calls me and says, I want to utilize your services for due diligence. I have a fee-based service based on the size of the practice that I'm dealing with, because a bigger practice causes more data, which means more time for me to analyze that data.
So you put in a bid for the project?
Yes, I will put a project.
But I still think, I know that's where your passion is, but for me being a selfish bastard, if you've got a rockin' hot office, if you're doing, $750,000 to $1.5 million or whatever, you just should call Amy and just have her give you a report card of what you done. Because, dude, you don't know your numbers. Anytime I talk to you, you don't know any of your numbers. So how would that work if my homie called you? He gives you a password, or you hack into his own system?
I can do a login. Yes,
you do a login.
Yeah.
So how much would it cost if some dentist is driving to work right now and him and his spouse are in the car and they're thinking, you could read his or her numbers like a tarot card? What would that cost for him for you to dial into their system and just tell you, this is what I think about you? Because how many offices have you analyzed in 25 years?
Holy cow!
You were doing this when I was 2.
Thanks.
I'm only 27. No, you've been doing this for 25 years, and you've done this with some of the biggest consulting firms in all of dentistry.
I was trained by one of the most well-known firms in the industry.
And in the valley here, you're I don't know anybody. I mean, Phoenix, Arizona is the 6th largest city in the United States. It's the largest for a state capital. It's the 12th largest metro. There's 4 million people in the valley. I mean, you're the number one guru in Arizona. I mean,
I'm the person that people call when they want to understand the numbers.
So how much would it cost if this dentist is driving to work right now and thinking, I wonder what's going on in my numbers? Since you don't know your numbers, how much would it cost for you to dial into his system and tell him what's going on in his practice?
I charge $1,500 for an analysis.
And how long does it take you to do that?
It takes me about 2 hours to get into their system and capture all the data. And then my homework takes me anywhere from 8 to 12 hours to pull all that data together. And then I do a phone call or a meet one-on-one if I'm in that city with the person and help them understand all that data.
So a low PPO practice gets $600 for a root canal, $600 for a crown.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be like worst case scenario. That's $1,200.
Mm-hmm.
And better PPOs pay $800 for a root canal and $800 for a crown. So that's $1,600.
Uh-huh.
So for the price of a PPO, one PPO root canal and crown, you could actually have someone who's done this for 25 years know your numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what every one of them should stop the car and do. But they won't. They'll say, well, I can't because I'm going to buy an $80,000 laser. And in my practice, if I just bought a $150,000 CEREC machine, the whole practice will just magically take care of itself. No. I'll upgrade my Pano 2D to a $100,000 3D. Because once the Panos go from 2D to 3D, then my house will be in order and I'll know all my numbers, right?
No.
Yeah, that would only work if you could shove your whole office into the CBCT and take a three-dimensional X-ray. So I'm passionate about this because all I ever ask for my dentist, I just say, be good, be happy, be healthy. You know, don't be bad, don't kill yourself, don't eat nitrous and Vicodin. You know, just be happy and healthy. And they're dentists. I'm a dentist. I mean, I'd rather pull 4 wisdom teeth than play golf. I get it. But they always want to learn about sinus lifts and bone grafting. They don't want to learn their numbers.
The numbers aren't for everybody, but you at least need to have an understanding of them. And you know, some people are much more analytical and they really want to, you know, understand if hygiene percentage of retention is at 60%, then what do I need to do to get it to what your ideal is? Well, I'd love to see them at 85%. So what's that going to look like? Am I tapping into the full health of my hygiene department or not? And I can assure you that most practices, when I go in and look at them initially, they run between that 60 to 65 range of retention.
When are you gonna write an article for Dental Town about these things, or create an online CE course?
If you have a master writer who can take my verbal and put it into text,
I do.
I'll do it. I am
4.
much better at talking than I am writing.
Well, we'll make a date at Dental Town, and I'll get my editors guys to sit down with you, and we'll just record what you're saying and help doing it. Okay, so I'm going to go back because you said a lot of numbers fast, and when they get out of dental school, they know physics, the Krebs cycle, the periodic table. But you said asset, income, and market value of a practice. Explain the difference between those 3 things, because that flew right over their head.
Yeah, I'm sure. So there are analyses that can be done, and I have a gentleman that I work with who did my sister's analysis. And when you truly want to understand what the health of that business is, it's going to be broken out as assets, which is what you own as far as equipment, you know, what that facility has within it, your chairs, your technology, all of that is your assets of the practice. What do you actually have that you own? And some of it may still be in loans, but they're still considered assets. So what are your assets of the business? Then we look at what is the income, and that's one of the main things that the banks look at when they're looking at funding for a dental practice is what is the cash flow, the income of the business? How much money does the practice make? And can it cash flow to sustain the debt service that you're going to incur when you purchase that practice? And that's what the bank looks for. Then you look at the market approach, which is just like looking at house comps. You know, we're looking at what other practices similar to this have sold for.
That's the market value.
That's the market value. So what's the market look like? What have other practices within the dental market sold for? And it may not always be in this particular area. We may look at the market from different areas, but the same practice size. So same volume that it's doing, same number of operatories, etc. So when you can take the 3 values and then you come up with a combined average value, that gets you to a more clearer and fair representation of what the purchase value should be for that practice. So
okay, so right now, podcasters are young.
Yes.
They're 30 now. Probably everyone listening there could be my own child.
Yes.
Okay. So she's she's born and raised in Salina, Kansas. She's going back there. There's only 2 practices for sale. And so she doesn't care about the market value. She doesn't want that one. She wants this one.
Okay.
And it's for $750,000.
Okay.
And emotionally, she's already bought it.
See it all the time.
So why should she call you for due diligence? And what does that even mean?
Yeah.
So I'm telling her, slow down, Spanky. Before you buy something for $750, maybe someone should tell you. Maybe someone should take an X-ray of this practice and tell you if there's any pathology. So what is due diligence? How does she pay you? I mean, she's already got a broker. It's probably 9 times out of 10 AFCO. So she's already got a broker, and I'm telling her AFCO wants to sell the practice. So she's already got the practice. It's $750. She's got a broker. What is she supposed to stop, drop, and roll and do?
So you have something that you're interested in. You have a practice that you're interested in. You asked a couple of questions in there, so let me cover each one of them. You have the practice. The broker has listed it, and they've given you a packet of data about this practice. Sometimes it's just a sheet of data about the practice that tells you here's what the practice has produced, collected, whatever, and how many chairs it has, and how many rooms are plumbed, et cetera, et cetera. So you get limited information. Some give more than others, but you get information about that practice. And oftentimes that information is collected by the doctor, sometimes by the broker, but oftentimes the team members don't know that the practice is being sold. So they're the ones who generally know the software the best. And now I'm asking a doctor to go in and provide me information out of their dental software. So how accurate is that data that you have been provided initially about the practice other than the production and collection reports? So what I help my buyer understand, they now hire me. So they call me and say, I'm interested in going deeper.
They call you at what number?
They call me at 602-690-6031.
That's 602-690-6031.
Yes.
And what is your email?
My email is d4metrics@gmail.com or amy@d4metrics.com.
And what do you prefer on contact?
I prefer a phone call.
You prefer a phone call?
Yes, and
602-690-6031. But they can email you, amy@d4metrics.com
Yes.
or d4metrics@gmail.com.
Correct.
And she would email you and she'd say, I'm thinking about buying Old Man McGregor's dental farm. And this is my broker. And she just calls you. And then you would
I would
call
say-
the selling dentist and say, give me the password.
I actually call the broker and I'll say, the client has contacted me and is interested in engaging my services for the due diligence process.
And what is due diligence?
Due diligence is getting into the practice, and basically it's like lifting up the hood on a car and looking at the spark plugs and looking at the hoses and looking at everything that's underneath the hood and saying, here's what we really understand about the mechanics and the workings of this vehicle.
And what percent of the time can you do that remotely versus you need to go to Salina, Kansas?
The majority of the time I can get into the dental software as long as it's software based and it's not chart based. If it's still a chart-based practice.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yes.
What percent are
Yes.
selling chart-based?
Most of them are, I've only actually done 2 in the last several years that are completely charts.
that
There's
was
no
a
dental
nightmare?
software. Oh yes, it was hours and hours of time, and it was literally going through charts, and I had to create an Excel spreadsheet and one chart at a time. It was
Okay, so then she's thinking, okay, well, this is just cost. You're just overhead. You're just
No.
making this all expensive.
So here's how the cost is involved. You give me a deposit to say I'm interested and I'm serious with this process.
And how much is a deposit?
$500 deposit. And then the balance, depending on how large the practice is and how much time is involved, is not paid until you actually purchase the practice, because once your loan is funded, then you pay me.
Okay, now tell some value, some case stories. Like okay, so this lady Amy called you up and she got your service. I mean, show them stuff that you're finding. So
I'm finding that.
how do you create value?
So when you look at a practice analysis report from this broker, you're going to see that the new patient flow, for example, is 25 new patients a month. Well, we actually go in and we understand what type of new patients are coming in. Are they coming in as full comprehensive exam patients? Or are those 25 patients limited as well? Because the software that you have will only put them in as a new person, when you put their name in the system. I've gotten into practices where, for example, EagleSoft will count a new person even though they've never had a first visit date in the practice. When you put their name in the system, whether they're a responsible party, the insurance carrier, the guarantor, parent, and they've never physically been into the practice, it still counts them as a new person.
Good job, Dentrix. You're just amazing.
That's EagleSoft. Dentrix.
Oh, that was EagleSoft?
Dentrix will actually do a report that tells you new patients, but it'll tell you whether they had a first visit date or not as well. So they put them in the system. You can classify them as a non-patient or a archived patient or an active patient or an inactive patient. So for new patients, example, I go in and look at the new patients that are coming into the practice, and are they actual 0150s, which means they got a comprehensive exam and they became a participating patient in our practice, or are they an 0140, which they came in for a limited only and they never became a part of our practice. They came in for an emergency, they never got treatment other than what they had that day, and they never became part of my hygiene department. So I want to know what kind of new patients are coming into my business. That's part of the due diligence.
And what's the code for Groupon?
99999. Yes. Oh, trust me, I just did one of those. That was a Groupon. Yes, not too long ago.
So the other thing is the dentist only sees her practice.
Yes.
How many practices have you seen data on in your lifetime?
Oh my gosh. I would say thousands probably at this point.
So do you want to go through any ranges or metrics of like what you're looking at, what you're benchmarking, or do you want to talk about benchmarking?
I can talk about that. So for example, let's talk about number of patients. When someone says, wow, I have 1,400 patients. Well, what's 1,400 patients mean? Well, let's talk backwards and say, if you have 1,400 patients, how many patients can a hygienist service? Well, I have 8 hours in a day, and if I'm on hour appointments, and I work X number of days, so basically there's 24 weeks in a re-care cycle. Out of the 6 months, there's 24 weeks, because out of the 52 weeks, we probably work about 48 weeks out of the year. Fair said? Mm-hmm. So divide that 48 by 2, and that gives you 24 weeks. So you've got 24 weeks in the first 6 months, and you've got 24 weeks in the second 6 months.
Because there's 52 weeks a year, so you're talking about 1 month's vacation?
Well, some people work holidays, vacation, time off.
So would you say the average dentist works 48 weeks? I mean, is that
that's what I see typically.
Okay, so you say the average dentist works 48 weeks. Mm-hmm. So the average dentist takes off a month throughout the year. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Holidays, vacations.
So those are just the dentist still on their first wife. They take off, but
probably so.
But the ones on their second or third wife, they work 53 weeks a year.
Let's say 2 weeks. So do it 25 weeks.
Oh, but what you're seeing is 48. So the average dentist takes a month off. One of my favorite dentist friends, Mike Totola, the reason he became a dentist is because his dad was a dentist. And he always took off August.
Oh, yeah.
When he's a little kid, he's like, damn, my dad has the best job. Mm-hmm. He didn't know anything about dentistry, but he knew his dad didn't work August.
He didn't know August was the most difficult time of the year to keep the schedule full.
So his dad just took off August, so Mike Totola only became a dentist because his dad. Okay, so what you're seeing in the field is the average dentist works 48 weeks a year. Mm-hmm. So on a 6-month cleaning, you're saying the hygienist works 224
She works
weeks.
224 weeks time frame.
So continue.
6 months and 6 months.
Okay.
So you can take that patient base of 1,400 and divide that by 24, and that'll give you an idea of how many hours a week minimum you need to service your patient base for 1 hour appointments.
So for 1,400 patients, there'd be 700 each half. Continue. So how would I know?
No, this is your whole patient base. You've got to get these 1,400 patients all in that 24 weeks. For
so
a
then
minimum,
you need 2,800 appointments.
Yes. If you're doing 1,400 patients, you need to get 1,400 hours of time, because if they all get 1 hour appointment, you get 1,400 here and 1,400 here. So for the full year, you need this many hours, 2,800. And that's just saying prophies. That's not saying perio and they come twice here and once here, or once here and twice here. So I can begin to help them understand the health of their practice and the number of hours.
1,400 patients, seen twice here. That's 2,800 hours.
Okay.
So how many hygienists would?
So one hygienist at hour appointments 32 hours a week, can service about 800 patients. So if you figure 200 for Monday, 200 for Tuesday, 200 for Wednesday, 200 for Thursday, I've got 800 patients for a 4-day week. That's just 1-hour appointments, 8-hour days. You're looking at how many hours do you need to service this 1,400 patients? So now I can say, well, if you truly have 1,400 patients, you need at least 2 hygienists, because now we've got to take into consideration you're going to have some perio patients in there. So you're going to need more hours. So at 1,400 patients, that's 800 each hygienist. That's 1,600 visits. Even though I have 1,400 patients, I'm going to have multiple visits for perio patients within the year. So if you divided 1,400 divided by 24, that would tell you how many hours you would need a week in hygiene to service patients at one hour appointment.
So you're saying a 4-day-a-week hygienist at 32 hours a week, 4 8-hour days, can only service 800 patients?
At hour appointments.
Right.
Yes.
So what would you say the average dental office number of new patients is? What do you like to see there?
If it's one doctor practice, 25 to 30 new patients are healthy.
Okay, so let's say it's 25. Mm-hmm. If a 4-day-a-week, 8-hour hygienist needs 800 patients, 800 divided by 25 new patients a month, that means every 32 months or every 3 years, you would add another hygienist.
If you're going at this rate.
Right.
If you want to grow, then you need double that in new patients.
But here's my beef. So you need so again, if you have a hygienist who works Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5, which is the norm. So 32 hours a week is the norm. So she can service 800 patients is the norm. 25 new patients a month is the norm. That means these practices
never grow.
Forget about 32. Let's just round it up to 36. Every 3 years you have another hygienist.
That's why nobody ever grows.
So look at every practice that's 10 years old. They still got one hygienist.
Yes.
20 years old, still one hygienist.
So tell me what the problem is.
So then,
They have a retention issue.
but do you admit that's all you see?
Yeah, I see it a lot.
And what's the biggest joke that I think's hilarious
I see it a lot.
is they're all afraid of corporate dentistry. Corporate dentistry can't even keep their dentist for a year. I mean, I don't want to practice across the street from all my homies crushing it like Tom Matter and Bob Savage and Sam Dominic, and I wish it was just 3 corporate centers, because it's just a revolving door of doctors and treatment plans are all coming in here and saying the same thing. I don't want to practice across my friends that are crushing it.
Yeah.
I want to practice just against corporate. So I would say this, true or false. I don't care if the dentist opened up at 25 and he's now 75. He still needs new patients and he still has one hygienist.
Yes.
So they all say, and then they all talk about, well, you should spend 3% on advertising. 3% advertising, you're the Colorado River that never built a dam. And you still need more melted snow coming down the river 40 years later. Yep. And then if you and I drive to Vegas and you see Hoover Dam where they say, hey, let's retain some water. Let's retain some patients. You can't even swim across that lake. Yeah. So while they're all worried about corporate, their own back door is wide open and 25 people come in, 25 people go out. Is what I just said true or false?
It is absolutely true. That's why these practices don't grow, because they have poor retention. So they have to put strategies in place to have better retention. But how do we even determine what the retention is? People don't even know what retention is sometimes. Well, retention is, have I kept that patient as a participating patient in my hygiene department? That's considered retention. It's not they came in, they got treatment. That's not retention. It's they came in, they established a relationship with our practice. They followed our recommendations, which got them into perio or regular hygiene, and they've stayed following that trend within the practice of, I come in for my 3 or my 4 or my 6 month recall, and I've retained that patient. What's happening that I see in the market is we don't have retention, because here in Arizona, we have so many daggone dentists, one on every flipping corner, that everybody's throwing out the deal. So what's happening is patients are jumping from practice to practice to get the deal, and they're not staying as retained patients in the practice. So they're not going to be in that 6 or that 12 or that 18-month recare cycle because they've jumped to another practice. And that's the challenge with what we have going on here with not having new patient retention.
So what you just said is build your practice with Groupon.
No,
Is that what you just said? Did I summarize that right? So
I did not say that.
so then
I said build it with relationships.
Is it fair to say then that an active patient is just any patient scheduled for an appointment? Like if you're scheduled for a recall in 3, 4, 6 months, you're an active patient. But if you came in and you're not on the schedule, does that mean you're not an active patient?
You're not retained patient.
Well, what is your definition of an active patient?
An active patient.
Because that's a term thrown around a lot.
An active patient is someone who is participating in my hygiene department, and I can plan hours for them in the next recare cycle that I have to see them.
So that means an active patient is anyone, the number of people scheduled in hygiene?
Scheduled or unscheduled that are due to get scheduled. So if they're past due, then I've got to work to get them. Ideally, retention is they're scheduled.
Do you recommend, that's a question I always ask, what type of recall system do you recommend to help with retention? Do you like to pre-appoint?
That's a great question. That is a really great question.
The first guest has said that was a great question.
Because I look at that based on the demographics of the practice. There are multiple, just as we talked in the beginning, there's multiple companies out there that will do your recall for you. But I can tell you.
And name some of them.
You have Solution Reach, you have Demand Force, you have, I think it's called Practice Solutions. There's multiple companies out there that are the overlays to the dental software that will do this outreach of recall for you.
Solution Reach, Demand Force.
Demand Force, Lighthouse is out there.
Lighthouse 360.
Yes. So these companies will do your recall for you.
Which one's owned by 1-800-Dentist?
That I don't know. You would know that.
Okay.
What my caution is for clients is when I look at the demographics of your patient base. For millennials, it's not as big of a deal when you've got a 30 or 40 year age group of your patient base. When I'm looking at patients that are 50 and 60 and 70, you don't send me all of this electronic contact and emails and text messages. That demographic of patients still desire a personal relationship contact. So I am very cautious as to truly understanding the patient base and the age range of my patient base before I allow a client to fully go electronic contact. I still keep some verbal in-house contact as part of the recare process that I put in place in my practices for that simple reason that not everybody is going to be electronic, email, and text message savvy. And when I have an older clientele, we need to make sure that we still establish a relationship and reach out to them in order to have a solid retention in my hygiene department. So proper recall, there are 3 foundational systems that I look at when I go into a business. First is having a proper recall system because that's keeping the flow of bodies into my hygiene department. This is all general, and actually, when you're looking at specialty, it's not recall, it's your referral base. So you've got recall base, then you look at the restorative. Who's following up on somebody who didn't say yes to treatment? That's the second system. So you make sure you've got somebody with bodies into hygiene, you've got somebody working on the bodies into the restorative, and then you have one person working on the financials, meaning patient money and insurance money. If you've got those 3 systems in place in your front desk, then you should have a rock and roll in front desk and things should be flowing pretty smoothly. Doesn't mean you have to have one person for each one of those, but you have to have an accountability person to run those systems so that I can go to Carol and say, Carol, what's going on with the hygiene schedule? I can go to Julie and say, Julie, what's going on with the restorative schedule? And then Carol and Julie may share the ARs. So if you don't have the manpower to have a person for each one of those, then you have to define responsibilities and accountabilities to run those 3 systems. Those 3 systems will keep your front desk money running very smoothly. If you don't have those, then that's where myself as a coach comes in and says, let's get the proper systems in place so that we can improve patient flow into hygiene, patient flow into restorative. And then we can begin to drill down and balance out what the schedule needs are. So maybe we do staggered schedules. Maybe we do Roxanne and Water scheduling, whatever that may look like within that
was
business.
Jennifer D. St. George.
Yeah, all those years ago. Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back to specifics. So here's the lines we see. If we look at Marco's, the only PhD economist, works for the American Dental Association. He's got some YouTube videos. He writes a lot of articles. Dentist income peaked in 2005 at $224, and it's been dropping $3,800 a year for 10 years. It's down to $174. So we've gone, the last decade went from basically $225 to $175. Because in the PPOs are a 40% fee reduction, 82% of the dentists taking it. How many times do you find this? A dentist will say, well, I got that hygienist and I want retention. So I want to go from one hygienist to two hygienists, but he's taking a dozen PPO plans and he doesn't even know he's making money on the deal. So how do you, when you're doing due diligence on a practice, I mean, a lot of dentists will say, well, there's two offices for Sell and Parsons. They both do $750 a year. They're both selling for 1 year's production, $750. But one is a indemnity or cash. And on that $750, he's taking home $225.
That's something that I look at too.
The other guy's 82% PPOs and probably when you're taking a dozen PPOs, what percent of the time do you think the dentist is losing money in his hygiene department?
Always. They're always losing.
Can you just write me a quote? So say that more.
They are always losing money if they're taking PPOs.
On what? Hygiene department?
On hygiene.
Yeah.
Because the hygiene's never going to hit
some dentists
industry standard of 3 times their wage.
Some dentists will sit there and say, well, I got one hygienist, I'm going to two hygienists, and I'm looking at his math saying, dude, I can tell you how many hygienists it will take for you to declare bankruptcy. And they don't get it because their management information system doesn't have their payables. And I mean, this would all be fixed
what can happen,
if it was merged with their accounting software.
You can actually get into the dental software. I know for sure in Dentrix I can do this. I can go in and sort out my patient base by due date and by insurance company. And that's part of what I do through the due diligence is I can help them understand how many patients are under which plan so that we can begin to work with a specialist who does fee negotiations and helps us see which plans are going to help us make what we need to make or are plans that we just really need to dump because we're not getting enough volume.
Okay, true or false? You can only negotiate your PPO fee if you're in rural or if you're in urban, big city, multiple locations.
There are some companies that do not negotiate at this point.
Which ones are those?
I don't know all the specifics, but I can get you connected with
Who's your
people.
PPO negotiator?
I work with 3 different individuals. I work with Becky Baylock, and she has her own company. And then there's Clint Johnson.
Where's she out of?
She's here out of Arizona.
Okay.
And then Clint Johnson is here out of Arizona.
Clint Johnson?
Clint Johnson is also a gentleman that I work with. And then I also work with Ben Tuanay, and he's now in Utah. He used to be here, and he's now in Utah. So each one of those companies will...
Approximately 20% of the Arizona dentists are from Utah. Oh, I swear. 1/4 of my dentist homies in town were born in Utah.
Oh, yeah?
Can you deliver those 3 podcasts? Just one right? I'd love to follow you with those 3.
Yeah, I can contact all of them and ask them to get in touch with you.
Because they're all trying to decide that, should I go to Pankey Institute or Dawson or Coyce or Spear to learn TMJ? I'm like, TMJ? Mm-hmm. You don't even know if you're making money or not.
Yeah, so you can go to these 3 companies and I can get you connected with all of them and they can tell you whether they'll do an assessment of your codes currently. They'll ask you what your top 20 codes are that you're using and then what companies you're contracted with. And they can go to these companies. Some will negotiate and some won't. Depending on when you last looked at your fees, generally you can get them annually a fee increase with some companies. But again, it goes to making sure you don't just want to start dropping companies that you're working with if you don't know how many patients you have that are on that plan. And that's where I help in the due diligence side of helping someone, or even just an analysis side. If someone doesn't want to buy, we can still do an analysis of their practice and say, here's how many patients that you have on this plan, whether it's Delta or MetLife or Cigna or Aetna or whatever all those plans are out there. And if you were to drop that plan, this is how many patients you could potentially lose. So maybe you don't drop that plan right now. Maybe you phase out of that, or don't take any more new patients of that plan, or whatever it is that you need to do to begin to wean off of that one that is costing you money versus making you money.
What percent of the offices, how many insurance, PPOs, would you say the average dental office is
Oh
taking?
my gosh, anywhere between 8 to 12.
8 to 12.
Easily.
And what percent of the dentists, if they dropped, would you recommend that they drop like 1 or 2? Their actually production would go down, but they weren't.
Many of them need to drop.
And so
a couple of them because they're really low reimbursements.
So these 8 to 12, on average, how many of them would you say, if the dentist dropped it, their production would go down and their net income would go up?
I don't have that statistic for you.
But your gut feeling.
But my gut feeling is if you dropped 3, maybe 4 of them, that your volume of patients may go down. But if you focus on getting patients on those particular plans and work on an in-house plan to ask for referrals of these patients that are already on the better paying plans, you're going to have better clientele coming through that have better insurance and better reimbursement ratios than the bottom of the barrel stuff that's just putting bodies in your schedule. And that's what you want to get away from, is just having bodies in your schedule, because they're non-profitable bodies. And it's not their fault, it's their insurance plan.
But what do you say the dentist says, I'm losing money on them, but I'm going to make it up in volume?
You're not going to make it up in volume. Supplies, materials, employee costs, you don't make it up in volume. You just don't. You have to look at the plans. You have to look at how many bodies are coming in per plan and have a better understanding of, they don't know that number. They can say that all they want, Howard. They can say, I'm going to make it up by plan, but they're not.
Another, whenever you're doing this, do you ever look for embezzlement?
I actually do, but that's not my specialty. I can see trends. I can look for things that may happen.
So you do look for red flags?
Yes, I do look for red flags.
And if there is embezzlement, who do you usually work with?
The best company out there is David Harris's company.
But they're Canadian.
I know.
Dude, we're not dealing with Canadians. Come on, Canada. That is, we don't look at the people up in the loft looking above the apartment, because we're all batshit crazy down here, and you guys look way too intelligent and refined. I bet they're looking at our election thinking, glad I'm in Canada, huh?
I'm sure they are.
So basically, I can vouch for this. In Phoenix, Arizona, I've only seen this study like one time, but for 1 year, 10% of all the homes sold in the city limits of Phoenix were sold to Canadians.
Oh my gosh.
1 in 10 homes. And yeah.
Why they want to come here, I don't know.
Yeah.
So what I do, I can see trends in, for example, you just had another gentleman that you did a podcast for prior to me coming, and we were talking about an existing client that we share. And I'm going through a particular client's database and beginning to see that, first of all, the person who made these adjustments didn't even know how to do a debit and a credit adjustment. So they added it on instead of taking it off. So I saw that there was just sloppiness first and foremost, because I'm looking at specific accounts. I do some investigative work. I've done some case work for people when they've said, hey, I really need to understand what's going on in these accounts better. Because I understand the dental software, they'll hire me as a specialist to go in and do some investigative work within the accounts, and that's what I'm doing for this particular person right now. So I'm going through each ledger to see, when was the last zero balance? What did the adjustments look like? How were the credits and things allocated? And then I can go back to the audit trail report and see if there's any craziness that's happening within that business database, so that I can see if there's true embezzlement happening, and are they deleting things and it's getting deleted, and if it's never getting put it back on. So there are times when I've had to do that. It's very rare that I've had issues where I've seen a lot of embezzlement on my side of things. It was before me typically, but I've seen it a couple of times.
So I just, have you ever watched Family Guy, Peter Griffin?
I've heard of it. I don't watch it.
Okay. Well, I've been told it's boy humor. You
Okay.
know, lots of fart jokes. But he had his segment, what really grinds my gears. And so one of the things that I'm passionate about is my homies, and I love them because I'm one. I mean,
Right.
I'd rather pull a wisdom tooth. I mean, I get it. But they always want to learn clinical. Like they have fantasies of bone grafting and placing implants. And so I want you're not a dentist. You've been in this for 25 years. What percent of the dentists listening here right now would you say probably don't know their numbers?
I would say at least half, if not more.
Okay, I
Because-
would say 95%.
Really? See,
But you think it's only half?
I think it's only half because
Okay,
I do
then-
a lot
then
of
I-
personalities, and my dentists are generally, they're usually analytical and detailed oriented. So that's where the clinical side comes in.
Okay, so
but
you're saying half know the numbers and half don't.
probably.
Okay, but she's driving to work right now. She's going down Interstate 10. We have these shows for an hour because that's
Okay.
what their average commute is. And even the ones that say it's only a half-hour commute, they listen to half to and from. Start asking them numbers so they can listen to
So,
you.
do you know what your new patient retention is? If not, then you need to go back 6 months ago and look at your 6 months new patients and say, where are they now? Did they come into my practice as an 0150 or an 0140? Did they get hygiene? Are they scheduled in hygiene? Did they get treatment? And do they have outstanding treatment?
And what would be the national average, and where do you think it should be?
I prefer to see it at 80% or above.
That means
of
you're
my new
keeping
patient.
4 out of 5 new
Yes.
patients, which means you'd be adding a hygienist every
Yes.
3 years
And that-
at
well,
25 new
if I'm
for every
getting-
25 new patients a
For
month.
every 25 new patients, I would be able to add another hygienist at the end of my next recare cycle if I'm retaining those 25, which is 200 new patients. So for every Monday, I need 200 patients for that hygienist. So if I get 25 new patients, 25, 25, 25 by April, and I retained all of those, I've got 100. Now by the next 4 months, I've got 200 if I retain all of them. You better be adding hygiene days if you have good retention.
Okay, but they're going to have one hygienist for their entire life. And you
I
know
know.
it.
That's
Okay,
what
yeah,
most of them do.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny because they all know how much they should spend on advertising. What do you think the average spends on advertising, and what do you
Well,
what do you think they should
percentage-wise-
spend on advertising?
Percentage-wise, depending on, that's different for everybody. I will say this because if you want to grow to bring on an associate, then you need to spend more money on advertising. If you have associates that you need to keep busy, then you need to spend more money on advertising. If you just want to maintain where you are, then your percentage would be less.
But
So,
what would the
well,
maintain?
I mean, people say you can spend anywhere between 4 to 6 and sometimes up to 10% of your annual on your marketing budget.
But here's where I think they need to think about this. So we know they never add another hygienist, so their
Right.
patient retention is 0. Whatever, if someone walks in the front door, someone's going out the back door.
Yes.
And they always want to spend money on advertising and marketing campaigns. They all want to build a Facebook page, a website, and all this stuff like that. But then when you
Track
say, well,
it.
but then when you say, well, let's spend some money on something patient retention, like
Mm-hmm.
a painless shot, or anything to keep them there,
Mm-hmm.
they see that as an expense. So I think they should spend more money on patient retention and
Yes.
patient loyalty.
Yes,
And,
and that is in-house things that you do to keep patients excited
Like
about
what?
coming to your office. So do drawings, do giveaways, do an annual event that says, here's the new technology we brought to my practice. And I had one of my clients up in Payson just did a wine and dine and Invisalign. So they had people come in because they just brought the iTero into their practice, so they don't have to do actual impressions now. They can use the iTero. So they did a wine and dine and Invisalign night. So they invited existing patients to come to the practice and learn about Invisalign.
But here's how insane my homies are. They would not do that. You know what they do? They'd send a flyer to every patient, say that for new patients only, if you come in, you'll get $100 off Invisalign because now you no longer have a patient. And then all their existing patients like, well, that little ass, I've been going to his practice for 10 years. And if you're just walking off the street, you'll get the deal. I mean, they do the opposite. They would never have one of the most successful dentists I ever knew in Wichita, Kansas. He said to me one time, I shouldn't tell too much of the story because I don't want to give it away or embarrass him. But he'd say, a lot of people in Kansas, they have nowhere to go on New Year's Eve. So he rented out the most rocking hot New Year's Eve party. He had a cover band. He said he thought that half of his old farmers stayed with him because they had nowhere to go. But it was a formal kick-ass. It was the most
Fun
rocking
event.
hot New Year's Eve party. And he said he thought that was the number one thing he did for patient loyalty. Then, but
that's the kinds of things you need to do is to engage your patients in your practice so that they're always talking about your office. You want them, so think about this. Okay, you just hurt me, gave me pain, gave me a filling crown, whatever you did. I come up to the front and now it's more pain. You're taking my money away. You need to leave them with excitement instead of the pain of taking their money. You need to have something at the front that you're giving away a drawing. So you create excitement versus creating pain for them by taking their money. Collect their money, and then once you collect their money, say, oh, by the way, did you guess how many yards of floss are on our little design here? You have to do things that take their mind away from what you just took away from them, which is their money, or the pain that you just caused them. You need to redirect their minds to, you know what? They need to walk out of here going, oh my gosh, you've got to know what my office is doing. They're giving away this huge, cooler of all this stuff because it's football season and they're getting ready for tailgate. So all this stuff that's in this cooler, you got to go in and, get to know them. So you want to change and redirect their energy from being we take something from them versus we give them something. That's my focus when I have my clients in their offices do things that are relationship building and retention building things and taking that patient into consideration. You took their money, you created pain for them, now do something good for them when they walk out the door.
My best friend from Creighton, Tom Mattern, who practices right down the street from me, he rented the movie theater at an off time and sent a deal to all of his patients to come there free the movie, and they thought, maybe someone will show up. It sold out. It was standing room only. It was like this huge party. So he's sitting there networking and having a blast all day long, but
people like
always
to feel included. They like to be a part of something. So you make them part of your dental family versus, okay, we come to work and we do our job. You make them part of their dental family.
Which is why I can't join a country club. Because I would never join any country club that would take me as a member. I'm like, dude, you got to have standards,
Yes.
Seriously, I can't believe that it's been an hour.
I know. We need more time.
But
too many topics.
Yeah, seriously, sorry if I'm all. By the way, if you're wondering why I jump around or what question I'm doing, you got to remember I get about 300 emails a day. I'm watching what they're saying on Dental Town. I'm trying to. When I'm asking questions, I'm actually seeing specific emails or text or whatever. But I just want to say that I know I always repeat myself, but I have to because it's a deal. You don't grow your business because every time someone comes in, someone goes out. There's no patient loyalty. You want to wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, jump in their mouth and do 3 crowns. Okay, they never come back. And then you're back to square one, and you're back to square one after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. You want customers for life. Number 2, you're like a chef. You just want to get the latest recipe for lasagna. You don't want to know anything about your numbers. And I'll tell you what, I've been in Ahwatukee 30 years, and my boys, we'll go to a restaurant, new restaurant open. I'll say, oh, can I, I'd love to meet the manager. And they'll come to the table, listen to their little, I'll say, yeah, I was just wondering, like how many new customers you get at your restaurant. I'll ask them like 10 metrics. They never know anyone. Only 2 restaurants. Since I opened in 87, the managers knew all their numbers. And it was Bob Benny's on Chandler and CK's.
Okay.
Those are the only ones here 30 years later. And they're both doing about $3 million a year, taking home $1 million. They're just crushing it. Yeah. And everyone else thought it was the new recipe, the lasagna, the health kick.
It's knowing how to run your business.
It's knowing how to run their business. And they always want to...
Numbers tell a story. I don't make the stories up. The numbers are your numbers. They tell a story. And if you know how to interpret that story and how to change that story, you can improve your business.
And if you would just call her at 602-690-6031 for the price of a crown, a root canal and a crown, you could let Amy tell you what's going on in your office. And then run off to your TMJ course, because God knows that is so important. But somebody's got to be doing in charge. And if you're sitting here next to your spouse, who's the dentist, and you're the office manager, the spouse, or whatever, Amy will talk to you. You don't need to be a dentist to talk to Amy. Nope. And what percent of the time are you dealing with the doctor's spouse?
Actually, there's quite a few spouses that are involved, and I appreciate that because this is their life too. And it's important for them to understand the health of the business and how that reflects to the home life. and what comes out of that business for them to have the lifestyle that they want.
And you know what's so sad is so many divorces, they say they're in thirds. They're over money, sex, substance abuse. But if you look into all three of those, they're just not communicating. They're not
Right.
communicating that. I don't like it when you come home and drink a 12-pack every night. They don't ever talk. And I'll never forget, I used to buy homes on the FHA bankruptcy deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so sad because these are just houses that were FHA bankruptcy.
Mm.
And everyone you walked in, you'd see fist holes through the
Oh,
wall.
gosh.
And you're saying like, oh, how sad this is. This must have been horrible violence.
Mm-hmm.
And dentists have a high suicide rate. They have a high divorce rate. They have a high substance abuse rate. And a lot of it's because while you're out there learning TMJ, you don't know that
got
you're
numbers.
losing money on 2 of your 12 PPO plans.
Yes.
So do more numbers. Get your house in order. If your house is not in order and you buy a $100,000 3D X-ray machine, now you have a crazy house with a 3D X-ray machine.
That's right.
If your house is upside down, you buy a CEREC machine. Now you have an upside down practice with a CEREC machine. Just get your house in order. All boys have toys. They all have boats and cars and all that shit. But if you get your house in order, you can buy a CEREC machine in cash. You can buy a CBCT in cash. You can fly out to Dominican Republic with Aaron Garg and sink 25 implants. But buying a fancy toy does not get your house in order. Amy will take the x-ray of your practice, get your house in order, and then be good, be happy, be healthy. Love you lots. Thanks for
you.
coming by.